So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, it is officially draft season. We are less than a month away from the NFL draft, and while everybody's excited about players you want to draft, while everybody's excited about who's going to be there at 6, who's going to be there at 18, the new players that are going to join the Detroit Lions this season, there is a flip side to that coin. There are players that the Detroit Lions shouldn't draft. There are players that don't fit the Detroit Lions scheme or may not fit the talent at the position that they may be available. And I found this article today that I found fairly interesting. It's a watch 2 players the Detroit Lions should not draft. Now, I personally have quite a few players that I'm not particularly high on, that the media and the masses seem to be very high on. There's a couple players that I'm incredibly high on that a lot of people aren't in the same spot as me. So I wanted to go through, look at the 2 players that they mention here, but also give a couple of my guys that I wouldn't want to see the Detroit Lions draft in the 2023 NFL draft. So with that being said, the opening picture is the Georgia Bulldogs, and there are quite a few players in this picture that the Detroit Lions could be drafting. Now, the 2 players from this article that says do not draft are going to be Calijah Kancey and Kelee Ringo. Now, since both are talented players worthy of being selected high by someone, just not in Detroit. I believe the Lions will view it that way too. Find out why in the video below. Now, I wanted to talk about these 2 prospects in particular because one I very strongly agree with and one I very strongly disagree with. Now, Calijah Kancey is a very popular selection for the Detroit Lions, and it makes a lot of sense. The Detroit Lions need a pass rushing 3 technique. They need an interior pass rusher similar to what Aaron Donald is for the Rams, similar to what Chris Jones is for the Chiefs, similar to what a lot of the top interior rushers are for their respective teams. The Lions have addressed their edge rushers with Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston. They have the Okwara brothers. They still have Josh Pascal and John Kaminsky to rush the passer from the edge. What they don't have is an interior pass rusher. Levi Onwuzurike was supposed to be that, but never ended up turning into that player, right? Injuries kind of derailed his career early, and Aleem McNeil was never built to be a full-time pass rusher, nor was Isaiah Buggs. So the Lions need a pass rusher, and Calijah Kancey can do that. He is a small, undersized defensive tackle that is incredibly quick with his hands and feet, is incredibly good at penetrating the pocket, and very good at creating pressures, sacks, and big plays with his speed and quickness. However, I don't think he's a good fit for the Detroit Lions. Now, on a surface level, from the numbers, from the production, from the highlights, you would say this player is exactly what the Detroit Lions are looking for, but personally, I disagree. I think the Detroit Lions want somebody that is going to be able to do everything. I don't think they want role players in the first round, especially at the 6th or the 18th overall pick. Those are top 20 picks and potential franchise cornerstones, and I don't think you'd want to waste it on a guy that is historically small, that doesn't really push the pocket or address the running game needs all that much in the defensive line. And you're going to be drafting a guy in Calijah Kancey that is historically short arms, historically shorter than Aaron Donald, smaller than Aaron Donald, and is nowhere near as powerful or strong as Aaron Donald, even though that seems to be the likely comparison. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if he falls to the 2nd round, which I think is more likely than him being drafted by the Lions in the top 20, then I think you can do that. I think you take the role players in round 2. I think if Calijah Kancey's there at 48, there's very real chance the Detroit Lions could take him with the 48th or 55th overall selection. But as far as the first round selection, I think the Detroit Lions are going to want more of a well-rounded player, somebody who's more of a cornerstone piece, not a rotational role-playing piece. Now, with that being said, I disagree with the Kelee Ringo take. I think Kelee Ringo is going to be a really good cornerback in the NFL. And I understand that his hips are not the most fluid. I understand that he doesn't change direction as well as some of the other cornerbacks in this class. And he may not be as physically fluid or gifted as some of the other cornerbacks like Christian Gonzalez or Joey Porter Jr. I think there is an argument to be made that Kelee Ringo is the most physically gifted cornerback in this class from a size and speed standpoint. He is somebody that is a 6'2", 210-pound cornerback that runs in the 4.3s, does not get beat over the top very often, has the good ball skills, is very patient on his routes, is very good and sticky in man coverage, and I think is getting a lot of hate for the fact that he really got beat up a lot by Marvin Harrison Jr. in the college football semifinals, which I think is unfair to say because so did everybody else in the season. I think this is a very similar situation and very similar recency bias to what happened with A.J. Terrell versus Jamar Chase. A.J. Terrell, a top cornerback out of Clemson the entire year, had a really bad game in the national championship versus one of the best receiving prospects in recent memory, and all of a sudden he falls to a late first-round pick or early second-round pick. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was one of the best cornerbacks until he wasn't. I think Kelee Ringo was the same way. All season was the consensus cornerback one, and then all of a sudden he had a bad game versus a top wide receiver prospect, a wide receiver prospect that very well could go number one overall next season if the right team has that selection, and we're going to hold it against him like he can't cover anybody. Whereas the next week he came out versus a projected top 10 wide receiver this year in Quintein Johnston and completely shut him down in the college football national championship. But nobody says anything about that because that wouldn't fit a narrative. Now, I certainly understand the comments. I understand the concerns about Kelee Ringo's hips. I understand the comments about his fluidity, but it's really hard to watch Kelee Ringo and not want him to be a cornerback on your team. He is incredibly patient when reading routes. He's incredibly physical, always fights for the ball, always is in good position to make plays, never gets beat over the top, is big enough and strong enough to tackle, while big enough and strong enough and long enough to break up passes even if the wide receiver gets their hands on the football. I think Kelee Ringo is built to be an NFL cornerback, even though a lot of people think Kelee Ringo is built to be an NFL free safety. Now, Kelee Ringo is not my first cornerback on the board. Actually, I believe he is my cornerback 4 at the moment, but I think that the Lions at 18 especially could be really interested in the product from Georgia because he is what they want. He is a good leader, according to Kirby Smart and multiple teammates. He is a physical specimen of what they could want at the cornerback position. He's a freakish athlete, and he has big play potential without giving up big plays over the top. I think Kelee Ringo would be a great selection for the Detroit Lions, and if he does fall to the second round like Calijah Kancey, I think it would be a great selection to bring in the Georgia Bulldog. Now, with that being said, those are not the only players that I think the Detroit Lions either should or should not take. There are a couple other players that I do want to mention today that aren't mentioned in the article, but just personally for me while we're covering the topic, I did want to mention. First off is Bryan Bresee. I don't think Bryan Bresee is a very good prospect at all. I have him outside of my top 32 prospects as a second round grade at best. I'm really concerned with his production. I'm really concerned with his injuries. I'm really concerned with really everything that he's done since being the number one prospect and since going to Clemson as the number one recruit out of high school. Never really lived up to the hype, never really lived up to the expectation, never finished a full season of college football, and was never really all that productive to begin with at Clemson when he was on the field. That is incredibly concerning to me. Another player that I think is getting a little bit too overhyped is the guy Kelee Ringo shut down in the college football national championship, that being Quintein Johnston. He is a projected top 10 pick at wide receiver, despite barely reaching 1,000 yards on the season, despite not really being all that great of a wide receiver right now. He doesn't create great separation, doesn't run very good routes, does not high point the ball despite being 6'2", almost 6'3", and being the ideal X body type. And yes, he's explosive after the catch. Yes, he can do a lot of big things and be a big play guy for your football team, but he has so much more to develop in his game. Spending a top 10 pick on him seems so risky and so unnecessary, especially for a team like the Detroit Lions, who, yes, need a long-term X, but don't need a player with as much of a project as Quintein Johnston is. Now, those are my two players, and as far as the overall going, those are three players in Calijah Calijah Kancey, Quintein Johnston, and Brian Brzee that I don't think the Lions are going to have a lot of interest in unless it is in the second round. I think each of those players have value, but none of those players should be valued in the first round of the NFL draft. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below, what players do you think the Detroit Lions should or should not draft? What players are you maybe high on that a lot of people aren't? Or what players are you very low on that most people seem to want the Detroit Lions to take? I'd be very curious to you guys think. With all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. If you enjoyed the Lions content, make sure you go down and hit the subscribe and the like buttons. It helps out the channel, and make sure that you get Detroit Lions content daily. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions!